Welcome to today's event at the Swindon Festival of Literature, which, as a result of restrictions to spread the virus, has become a virtual online festival of literature. Now, thanks very much, everyone, for joining us. We do hope that everything is well where you are. We're both pleased and grateful that human ingenuity, cutting-edge science, and digital technology make it possible for this show to go on, or at least to go on online. Now, a question. Is it possible to create a society where there are no rich, no poor, where children, elderly, and so-called disabled people are equally welcome and cared for, and where no one lives in isolation? How might a shared life, living and working together, where everyone pools their possessions, their talents, their energy, provides answers to isolation, materialism, and inequality? The Bruderhof, now with 3 communities in the United Kingdom and another 23 around the world, has been seeking answers to questions like these for over 100 years. And they do so by trying to live out and put into daily practice their beliefs, their aims, and their ideals. A beautiful book titled Another Life is Possible, and here it is, and it's even more beautiful on the inside than it is on the outside, recounts and explores life on the Bruderhof. To discuss both the book and the way of life that it describes, please join me in giving a Swindon Festival of Literature welcome to guest co-interviewer Catherine Okoronkwo, photographer Danny Burrows, Bruderhof member Bernard Hibbs, and the book's creator and also a Bruderhof member, Claire Stober. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very nice that you're here. Catherine, Danny, Bernard, Claire, we're delighted that you're able to take part in the festival, if only online. It's a pity we can't see you live in Swindon, because Swindon in spring is comparable to Paris in spring. It's lovely. The same rainfalls and the same sunshines as does anywhere else. In fact, have any or all of you ever been to Swindon?
Matt, I've been to Swindon only once in my life, I'm ashamed to say, and I had left the community that I'm part of, and I had money in my pocket, and I was looking to buy something, and I walked round and round Swindon, and I found the only thing I found to buy was a jacket that I bought and I never wore. And so that's my basically a failed piece of consumerism is my Swindon experience. So I'll have to come back and try something else.
You'll have to come back, absolutely.
Matt, you have to tell me, coming from America, where in England is Swindon?
If you picture a line, Claire, with on the east side, on the right-hand side, London,
Right.
and on the west side, on the left-hand side, Bristol, okay?
Right.
Capital and big port. Right in the middle where my mouth is Swindon.
Oh, well, I should have been there. Okay. You're just below the Cotswolds.
You've got it. We're very close to the Ashton Canes.
Okay. Yeah. Then I think I've been there.
Or near there, anyway.
Yep.
Well, I'm actually based in Swindon at the moment. I've actually only been here for about 13 plus months. So I was licensed as a vicar in November 2019 and had about 3 months just before the first lockdown. So I've pretty much known Swindon in and out of lockdown. But in terms of first impressions, I see it as a place that can grow on a person, and I'm looking forward to just spending more time in Swindon.
Thanks, Catherine.
Unfortunately, I can't better either Bernard's or Catherine's stories, so I have been to Swindon, but yeah, their stories are far better than mine.
Well, at least you've been to Swindon. You know, international photographer needs to have been to Swindon.
Absolutely.
At least you've been there. Danny, Catherine, Bernard and Claire, thanks very much. And we better get on to the topic in hand, the book, Another Life is Possible, which has scores of stunning pictures in it. And as we all know, pictures only partly tell the story, although there is that saying, every picture tells a story. but I think it only partly tells it. I think every picture also needs a story, and thankfully this book has 100 fascinating stories. But before we go to see what they tell us and have a little chat about it, I'd like to ask each of you to briefly tell your own story of how you came to be where you are now, so that viewers and festival followers can have a sense of who you are, who we are, and why we are having a chat about whether or not another life is possible. And as creator of the book, Claire, perhaps you'd like to start?
Certainly. I have to say right off the bat that I am a co-creator of the book. Like most things in community, many of us worked on it. Many of us had a hand in its production. So one name had to go on the cover and mine went on, but I very much share the responsibilities for the book. I came to the community about 30 years ago, and a book like this did not exist at that time. And as I say in the preface to the book, I wish a book like this did exist because it was a very good introduction to our life. Not so much from our historical standpoint, but from meeting the people in our life. And you get through 100 stories of 100 members, a very good quick introduction to a cross-section of the people who either grew up in community or came and joined like I did. And so and the book was originally conceived and designed to commemorate our 100th anniversary, which happened last year. And unfortunately, everything was in lockdown during that. So I'm sure when things ease up a bit, we're going to have other celebrations to really celebrate it. But the book was conceived to commemorate 100 years of community.
Claire, thanks very much. We'll come back to some points of yours in a little bit after we've heard from the others. Who'd like to go next?
Well, my coming to the Bruderhof story is even more interesting than my Swindon jacket story, believe it or not. And that is that when I was 6 years old, my parents wanted to go on holiday. We were living in Hampshire, and they stuck a pin in a map of England to decide where to go. And it landed on a place called Salehurst, which is about a mile away from where I'm sitting right at the moment, down in East Sussex, near a village called Robertsbridge, where our community is based. And we came on holiday. And we were driving around looking for holiday attractions to go and spend our money on. Except my parents were very stingy, so we didn't actually ever do anything of that. We just drove round and round the countryside. At least as a 6-year-old, that's how it appeared. And we drove right by the end of the driveway to our community, and there's a big sign there. And we thought, well, this looks like some free holiday fun. Maybe we'll drive down and have a look. And we drove down, and someone came out and said, "Welcome. Do you want to come and have a look around?" And my parents said yes. They'd been Christians for about 2 years, and something struck them right on that very first day, within the first couple hours, that this was a way of Christians putting into practice Jesus's vision for how we should be living in the here and now, and not sort of conceptualizing God's kingdom as something good to come in the future when we're all dead, but as something that we could actually positively live for starting now. And we spent the rest of our holiday actually here at the community. And ended up with 3 years later, my parents joining the community. I then grew up in the community. I left for a little while, and then didn't find fulfillment in consumerism, probably because I was very bad at it, as previously explained. And so I decided to join myself. And indeed, in my role as the community is to coordinate some of our outreach activities and to deal with journalists and photographers and people who want to write about us, which happens the entire time. And one of those requests that came in was from a wonderful chap called Danny Burrows, who said he lived near one of our communities. And because of that, I didn't just turn him down out of hand. I went over and met with him. And he told me about the work he was doing in Calais, which is where he had met our young people. And I said, okay, well, I'll keep your name on a file. And if we ever do want to have photographs taken of us, I'll let you know. So now Danny should tell his story.
Thank you, Bernard. I was working in the jungle in Calais, and I came across a group of teenagers who were working in the distribution center where secondhand clothing was being sorted and then redistributed throughout the camp. And I was quite intrigued by what sort of community would send their teenagers off to a situation like was happening in Calais in the jungle. And when I got back to England that trip, I wrote to an email I found on the Bruderhof site. Bernard replied and called me when I was in the camp as well, and invited me to pop in. So I popped in to the community just down the road from Deal in Kent, and I had lunch, and then we went our separate ways. And about a year later, Bernard rang me up and asked if I would be willing to shoot the book for them. So I thought it would make a great, well, it was a great opportunity to access the community and document their life, and also shoot their book, which was a real privilege, which Claire put together. And Claire was my sort of guide and mentor throughout the project, and it was a fantastic relationship we built up.
And I don't know whether you're just a brilliant photographer or whether you somehow got into the spirit of it, but I, as a partial insider, think you absolutely capture what I understand of the Bruderhof. Quite amazing. But we'll come to more of that in a bit. Thanks very much, Danny. Catherine.
Well, as I mentioned, actually vicar of All Saints and St. Barnabas in Swindon, and I've always been fascinated with community in various ways. I actually grew up in the Middle East, in Jerusalem, Israel, and the kibbutz has been a community that has been quite inspiring to me. And then over the years, I've engaged in a variety of different communities. So for example, the Taizé community, Ignatian communities, and I'm just fascinated by this whole idea of living in a different way in community.
Thank you very much, Catherine. And I had an inkling that you were really interested in communal living. In the few conversations I've had with you, I'm delighted that you're here. I should probably say something as well, declare an interest, as they say, in that I was born on one of the Bruderhof's communities in a place called Wheathill in Shropshire. And do you know the way none of us choose our parents? Well, I didn't choose mine. They were a rock and roll pair, and my mother was an Austrian refugee, and my father was an artist with a beard down to his waist. And they were living in a caravan near Ludlow, and with one son. And there are various stories of how they felt the calling to join the Bruderhof. But the one I prefer is this one, that they were walking down the high street in Ludlow one day, and on the other side of the street, they saw two men with beards. And my father went over to them and said, "I say, you have beards. I too have a beard. Why?" and the answer, they gave an answer, and my father said, "That's the life for me." And it was, they described a life of living out the Sermon on the Mount, where people call one another brother and sister. My father told me again and again how much he loved that idea, calling one another brother and sister and having all things in common. And they went and joined, and a couple of years later, I was born in a little hen house that had been converted to a maternity unit. And I've kept poultry ever since. And I wonder, I've always wondered if there's a connection. I've kept poultry ever since and always been drawn to communal living ever since, even though I don't live communally as such. But I do want to say, and this leads me to the first thing I'd like us to talk about, is that one of the things I recognize as I get older, which is something that many philosophers and writers have said, give me the child before it's 5, or give me the child before it's 7, and I'll give you the man or the woman. The older I get, the more I feel the influence of those early years. And it keeps coming out. I have children of my own now. I'm very grateful to have had 3 children with Andrea. We now have a grandson, another one on the way. And it comes out more and more. And the founder of the Bruderhof, Eberhard Arnold, said something in many different ways, but that's what I've been left with, is that children are the key investment, which sounds a bit like a banker, but are a key investment to any lifestyle. And in this book, on page 199, a member who was born the same year as I was, that's why I chose him, said, "For 15 years, the highlight of my week has been spending an afternoon with the 3-year-olds. Why? Because at this age, the child, now beyond infancy, is actually full of curiosity, seeing the world anew, eager to put all this use and find expression for it. If play is truly the noblest expression of what's in a child, it should be encouraged." I wonder if any of you want to say something about children and communal living, and whether one should put all one's energies or a lot of one's energies into the life of a child.
Do you think I could, as an outsider?
Danny, I think that'd be great.
I mean, I came in from the outside, from this crazy world where I have 2 children, and we have the influences of television and computer games, and our household doesn't have TVs. And still, my son turns 10 next month, and he doesn't have a computer or a phone. And my daughter just turned 8, and she doesn't have a laptop or a phone. So the idea of childhood as lived out in the Bruderhof really appealed to me, because I saw children who were able to just be children, without these being constantly bombarded by having the latest toy, or what game your friend is playing, and I found it very beautiful. And you said something earlier that you thought I had captured community in my pictures, and it was there to be captured. It was before my camera.
There's one of your pictures, Danny.
Yes.
Children on a fence looking out at a field.
Well,
I mean,
that was a really special day, actually, because Claire and I went out and met a member of the community sorry, Claire, I've forgotten his name.
Ian Winter.
Ian Winter. So he takes these children out into the wilderness, shows them around. They've got a little wilderness section. They built a fire. They had marshmallows. We looked at the birds. They blew bubbles. It was the most incredible day out for them, and you can just see the joy in their faces. I mean, there was some other pictures, and it's pure living for a child. It's what childhood should be.
Thanks very much, Danny. Anybody else want to add something to the point about children and communal living?
I have to say that one thing that absolutely resonated with me is the whole idea of intergenerational community living. Absolutely. So one thing I was taken back to was my childhoods in Nigeria, where I would literally be sat at a young age at the foot of my grandfather telling stories while my mother was cooking in the kitchen and auntie was, washing clothes. And there's this whole idea of it's the community that raises the child. And growing up as well, my uncles could tell me off, anyone from the family could tell me off, could play with me. And I think that's something that's a bit lost from on the world now. So there's something really special. If we could capture something about that community way of living, it would be great, really.
I think it's a real privilege actually for children within the community to have such close access as well. You know, in the mornings, everyone wakes up, they have their breakfast together, and dad's there to take children to school, and mum's there to be in the house. And yeah, so, and also when the kids break up, dad isn't coming home at 7 o'clock in the evening.
Okay.
You know, the shop is on the community, so dad can get involved and mum can get involved, and children can, I think, pop by the workshop and say hi to their dads, and you know, and yeah, you do have access to all your closest relatives and generations. It's really beautiful.
Thanks very much, Danny. Bernard, did you want to add something?
Yeah, no, the thing about proximity is really interesting. You know, my commute to my office in the morning is about 15 meters, and the school is about 30 meters away from where I'm sitting right now in my office. I see I have breakfast, lunch, and dinner in the evening with my kids, but also see them out the window multiple times during the day. And but my children then also, the point that Catherine made, and I've heard that from so many people from Nigeria and Ghana, from my friends from there, who say exactly the same thing. That, you know, my children have access to my parents, their grandparents who live just down the hall from us, but also other people on our community who they're not related to, and they can meet with them, they can hear their experiences. Those people can come to their classrooms. You know, they live with someone who was in the Iran-Iraq war. They have access to people who were, you know, led a life of activism and protest against war, with older people, with younger people, and you get that sort of rich mixture of community. And I think the other point of that is that I think that the COVID lockdown has given so many people the taste of what it is to live a life that's similar to that, and to be able to do their job and see their children as well. And for some reason, you know, we're living in a society where, unfortunately, people have to make an either-or decision. You know, do they live their own lives, or to give up their job to care for their parents? And why not build a society where we can do both? Or, you know, a society where people can work hard on the community. We're not lazy, and yet I get to see my kids as much as they need. And I think we should be looking to build a society like that for everyone, not just for the 300 of us in East Sussex.
That's a lovely thing to hear, Bernard, and many people are talking about that. I just want to address something that Danny said, so that people don't get the impression we are on the side, or certainly the festival might be on the side of adversely criticizing technology. I'm one of those people who recognizes that a camera, a television, a digital piece of equipment in itself isn't evil. It's how we choose to use it. And in our family, what we used to do is put the television in the coldest room, and it's brilliant. Then you only go to it if there's something really good. And so I think it's really not a question of inside the community or outside the community to do with these digital things, but rather how they're used. But I don't want to dwell on that too long, Danny. I just wanted to make sure, and I can see by your nodding that you concur. I'd like to go on to another thing that Catherine Trapnell says in your book. She says, somewhere along the way, I heard something that a philosopher said once. To find happiness, the individual has to give up himself or herself, to empty and rid him or herself of everything that is self-serving, and give his heart and himself over to serving others. That really impressed me. I wonder what part the Bruderhof plays in this idea, and it's not new, and many of us know that. You know, in primary schools they say, is it better to receive or give? And on television programs they ask the same questions. Serving others, what part does the Bruderhof play in serving others? Maybe members could answer that.
Well, I think giving people permission to serve others is the first step. And, you know, it's amazing how many people during COVID, like in the little village of Robertsbridge where I'm based, how many people suddenly went shopping for their neighbors and, you know, walked an extra mile to look in on someone who was lonely, and all those things that actually we could have been doing before COVID struck. And I think that's what the community, you know, because we foster the spirit of giving to others, of serving others, of not being selfish for ourselves. It gives people permission to do that. No one thinks it's strange if I you know, made cookies for my neighbor, or pushed a wheelbarrow for an old person that I saw. You know, no one would think that I want payment for it or something like that. It's just, you know, serving others is just a natural way of life, and it's something we teach our children from very early on. And I think it makes for a very, very healthy lifestyle where people think less of themselves and more of other people.
Thank you, Bernard. Claire, do you want to add something to that?
Well, I think what's especially salient about the one you read, which is Kathy Trapnell, is that she, like I, was a child of the 60s, where everything was focused on finding oneself. And to actually come to a place where serving others was much more valued than finding oneself was very refreshing, and a really, it was a transformation we all had to go through, and in a very positive one, and has a lot to say to address self-cycling or circling and depression in this day and age as well. You know, what people are saying now is that if you're not feeling happy, try reaching out to someone else, and it is an antidote. It's a very positive thing to do.
Thank you very much. Catherine, do you want to add anything to?
I think the points that Bernard and Claire make are very helpful ones. In my mind, it seems that when there's a community environment that creates the opportunity or the space for people to serve others, that can be more helpful. But normally people don't live in a vacuum. And I think the pools of the world, sometimes in terms of time, in terms of reputation, in terms of resources, can diminish people's serve others response. I do think people want to serve others and really would serve others, but sometimes there's so many things, you know, kind of pulling on their attention and their capacity to serve. So when you have communities that almost kind of boundary the opportunity and the space and they give the permission, it's quite helpful to do that. But a lot of people don't have the privilege of living in communities such as the Bruderhof, really.
It's a great point that you make there, Catherine. It really is about the structure, because I believe it's actually a human desire to want to reach out to other people and to serve other people. And yet people are so constrained by their job and their career and their, you know, having to get their kids to school or to after school clubs. And, you know, life can become frantic and there isn't the time then for others. And I think people would be healthier and happier if they had a mechanism by which they could serve other people on a regular basis. I think it's what people want to do.
No, absolutely. And of course, a lot of that does take place in non-communal settings, in the so-called outside world. But I think there's a craving for more, no question about it. I want to look at something else that seems to be very important to the Bruderhof. And in the book, you quote Rachel Carson, who wrote the book Silent Spring, and it's now become a concern of many people where we're going with the environment. And Rachel Carson says, "I am not afraid of being thought a sentimentalist when I say that I believe natural beauty has a necessary place in the spiritual development of an individual or a society. I believe that whenever we destroy beauty, or whenever we substitute something man-made and artificial for a natural feature of the earth, we have retarded some part of our spiritual growth." If that's not too profound a question, what is the Bruderhof's take on, because, you know, pagans believe in the part that nature plays and the relationship human beings have with it, and they have for thousands of years. So what do modern day Christians, what's the relationship with nature and its importance? Again, this is a question really for one of the members, but I know that Danny's photographs kept going, kept being drawn to it. He kept wanting to capture children in trees and children in fields and children in mud, and a few adults too, but nature and the Bruderhof.
It's all part of God's creation. And we need to respect it and honor it and cherish it, love it, and preserve it, and definitely help our children to have a very close relationship to it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you know, nature does play a very important part in our lives. You know, for me and my family, we spend our weekends walking in the woods and swimming in a beautiful lake, and that's where we sort of find our time to be a family together and to find inner peace. The beauty of creation is something to always be marveled at in both the, you know, the microscopic and the sort of macro. And I think that's why Danny's his best photographs are the ones of sort of the nature, of the children in nature. He took some really stunning pictures. And actually, he's the artist. He should be telling us about beauty in nature.
Yeah.
I'm going to address a question to Danny that does link up this question of nature, but also adds something else to it. Danny, you're not a member, and the members have a belief. And I want to ask both you and the members, because there are some groups of people who say, well, if you're not our belief, then if you're not with us, you're against us. They do black and white in everything. And I'm playing slightly devil's advocate here, how does a non-member work with believers? And I like Catherine, and I think Catherine also quite likes me. I hope she does anyway. But I'm not a minister of the church. What about belief and communal living? First of all, what about belief and working with the community, Danny?
I mean, I have a great respect for anyone with belief, but I was making some notes actually, and what I felt I really liked about the Bruderhof was that they put their faith into action. You know, the children or the teenagers being over in Calais, lots of members work abroad on charitable things. Bernard, you would know the organizations you work for. Is it Save the Children and
a whole bunch of places.
A whole bunch of places. I mean, and I've got a complicated relationship with the religion, having been at boarding school in the UK and going to church where religion was sort of forced upon us. I don't really see that happening in the Bruderhof community. In fact, I feel it's quite a natural path into believing. You know, the children are allowed to be themselves, and they're surrounded by a Christian faith, which I think they develop a love for, because they see its benefits.
Yeah. No,
that answers your question.
No, you have, Danny, you have. And as a child of the Bruderhof who left because his parents left while still a child, but then revisited as an adult and made a decision not to join, I'm still strangely, whisper this, don't say this too loud, I'm a defender of the Bruderhof. I love the Bruderhof deeply. And but I have to deal with terms like cult, fanatics, and so on. And I try to say, no, I don't think they are. And one of the things that was said to me when I was a younger man, and I was wondering whether or not I was visiting, thinking of what joining might involve. One of the things I said is, I don't believe in the God that you describe. and yet I'm drawn to the life you live. And they said, I can't remember who it was. It was a woman, a sister. She said, don't talk about it so much. Just come and do it with us, and you'll see. You'll be able to make this. Just come and do it with us. Don't talk about it so much. And I thought, there we go again. Words getting in the way rather than clarifying. But I wonder if Claire, Bernard, and Catherine want to say a little bit more about belief and how we live, and how much that has to dovetail or not.
Well, I think the project was a great example of how people should be working together. I knew that Danny was not a believer right from the outset, and yet I also really respected the work that he was doing. And talk about doing good things around the world. Well, Danny, every time I try and get hold of Danny, he's off doing something for other people, crazy projects that he dreams up, getting snowboarders jackets and donating them to refugees in Lesbos and things like that. So, I really recognized his heart in that. And I actually wanted someone we all wanted someone on the team who was behind this book, wanted someone who wasn't a Christian to come in and take the photography, because we wanted someone who's looking in with a different view to take those pictures, if that makes sense. And we've never felt that Danny's difference in faith to ours has ever been a hindrance to working together. And it's actually a great message to society at the moment, where we are, for some reason, increasingly breaking up into separate little groups. And if you don't believe exactly what I believe, then I can't even really recognize you as a human. And that's a terrible way to live. And on the Bruderhof, we're very faithful, we're very deeply Christian people. Yet in our depths of Christianity, we see that there are many people who are doing good in the world. And when we see that people doing good, we're very happy to do that with them.
Thank you, Bernard. Claire, do you want to add something to that? I'll come back to you in a minute, Danny. Sorry.
I don't really have anything to add to what Bernard said. I think he said it very well. But we would rather find what we have in common with people than build walls between us.
Well, that's terrific. That's really well put. Catherine, did you want to add something to?
I think Bernard has said it perfectly. I think as soon as you start really understanding that it's about seeing Christ in the other, then it doesn't matter where the other person stands or what they believe. At the heart of it, it's us coming together to actually create more flourishing communities, creating a deeper sense of love and belonging, a deeper sense of cooperation and collaboration. And one thing I've noticed from the Church of England point of view is that we do work in partnership with so many different people, thinking about our food banks, thinking about our schools work. It's all done in community with people of faith, no faith, other faith. And it's really about seeing God in the other person and allowing people to flourish on their own terms, really.
Thank you, Catherine. Danny?
I was just about to say, I think God exists in all of us, whatever your religion or non-religion, and the Christian values of the Bruderhof are shared by all good people. It's about, I really think it's about caring and loving others. And I think whether you're Christian or Muslim or whatever faith or non-faith, I think if you're a good person, you're a good person, and I think we can connect across those their shared values. And I mean, I kind of hang out with like-minded people, and I always know that they're there to help me, and I'm always happy to help them. So
your words, Danny, have reminded me that too many words do get in the way. You can recognize a good person with good intentions when you see one, regardless of what ism or ist describes them.
Absolutely, I believe so.
Yeah. We're coming near the end, and also near the end of this book, there is this line. This book reminded me of the importance of quite simply listening to each person we come across, each person we encounter. The simple act of just listening to another human being before you judge them. And then it ends with a sentence that says, whatever our beliefs, and this is really what all four of you have said, we're all looking for a life of love, justice, and joy. And everybody is actually doing that in their own different ways. And, you know, sometimes we go off the rails and don't quite find it. In the festival program, you might be interested to know, you appear, I don't know whether that shows, you appear just below Rowan Williams, who has a new book out called Looking East in Winter. For people who are watching this, festival followers, you'll know who Rowan Williams is. And he speaks of himself as a friend of the Bruderhof. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. He wrote the foreword for the book, and he's come to visit. And there, I think, is a great, going to the point of listening to people. Rowan was one of these people who was treated pretty badly by the media in the UK, and I think very misunderstood as a person. And when he comes to visit our community, he's just a wonderful person to be with. He's a fantastic communicator. I stuck him in front of a whole bunch of 9 and 10-year-olds, and he gave the best lecture I've ever heard about early church history and its relevance today to this little group, just completely ad hoc. So he is, and we're very lucky to count him as a friend. And I'm looking forward to reading his book.
And I don't want to have a go at the media, but there are lots of people who admire Rowan Williams greatly. So we mustn't believe everything the newspapers say about anyone, including the Bruderhof.
Right.
You know that. Any last words from anyone before we come to a close? We've just skimmed the surface. There are so many, look, the book is full of bits of paper of things I'd really like to look at. But when you're having a good time, 45 minutes just fly by. Is there anything that any of you want to say that needs to be said?
Well, I think something that would be of interest to your listeners is that a good preview of the book can be found on the website anotherlifeispossible.com. All the stories are there, all the photographs are there. It gives a very good sense of what they would find in the book. And if they want to go ahead and buy the book because it's to have a physical book, they can certainly do that, but they're not restricted by anything on that website from reading or taking a look at the photographs.
That's a really good and generous service. Thank you very much, Claire. Catherine, did you want to add anything from the Swindon perspective?
Well, I think just on the point of listening, I think if there's something that the pandemic has taught us, in light of all that we're being forced to confront at the moment on many levels, is just our ability to listen to the other, and being able to place ourselves in the spaces where we think we have a lot to say, but actually just being quiet and listening to people's stories. I think that is such an effective resource for all of us, particularly those of us who are thinking about how we can do community better. So for example, how can Black and white people live better together? How can men and women live better together? How can the able-bodied and disabled body live better together? So how do we do community better? I really think starts with listening to other people's stories without a motive or an agenda. And I think that's, some of what the Bruderhof has to say on this perhaps is quite pertinent.
Catherine, thank you very much. And if anyone goes to the Another Life is Possible site, reads, if anybody listened to this and liked what they heard, Bernard, what would they do if they wanted to come and check you out? What's the next step?
Well, that's the best way to experience the Bruderhof is to come and visit it. And we are starting to allow visits again, which is brilliant, as regulations permit. So they just go to our website, which is bruderhof.com, and find the community nearest to you, regardless of which country you're in, and you can just request a visit right there on the website, and you'll be welcome at one of our communities. I just wanted to say one thing, Matt, about the title of the book. The book's called Another Life is Possible. As always, titles get debated endlessly when you're trying to figure out what to call your book. And actually, it was it's become more true, I think, since COVID. You know, COVID's been a terrible thing, and yet it's also has made people, I think, aware that another life really is possible. Some people have had a glimpse of that, and sometimes, or maybe in some ways, we've realized that some of our priorities before were wrong. You know, when one of the key points about the Bruderhof is about that we pay people nothing. No one is paid for their work. And what it means is that people's contributions are treated equally. Whereas in society at large, generally, what society thinks of you will in some way be parallel to the amount you get paid. And then all of a sudden we have this crisis, and we realize that nurses are both underpaid and underappreciated in society. And all of a sudden we realize that they're far more important. And the cleaners in hospitals and people on minimum wage who are there to serve other people and serve us as a country as a whole. And so isn't it time that we realize a different way of life is possible, and we start working towards some of those basics.
Bernard, thank you very much. D'accord, as they say in French. Danny, we'll be looking for a photographer next year when we go live again as a festival. And we want someone who believes in this spirit of not charging too much, but wants to come and have a great community experience at Lower Shore Farm, which is people tell us that it's a kind of transient mini community, because there are always people here helping out and doing things. And I'd love you to come and experience, so you can do a compare and contrast with the Bruderhof and Lower Shore Farm. Would you do that?
Absolutely.
Or at least you'll consider it. Hey, everyone.
Just sign me up.
As Wordsworth said, long we had not talked ere we built up a pile of better thoughts, and could actually go on, but we can't. From the Swindon Festival of Literature, Catherine Okoronkwo, Danny Burrows, Bernard Hibbs, and creator or co-creator of the book Another Life is Possible, Claire Stober. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Matt. It's been a real privilege to be on and to be with all of my co-creators and to meet Catherine.
Thank you.